Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Kiryu 2002 version 2.0. Now, this character comes from the 2002 film Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which is one of my favorite movies in the franchise, and definitely one of my favorite movies to feature Mechagodzilla. It's either this movie or Terror of Mechagodzilla. I love both of those movies very much, but as far as Godzilla against Mechagodzilla goes, I really like the characters. The writing here I think is very strong. The script I think is really well done. The music is great. And overall I do think it's a very solid movie. If I were to do anything different, so spoiler alert for a 20-year-old movie. So Godzilla's like the bones of the original Godzilla are built into Mechagodzilla in this movie. And there is a point where, Kiryu sort of gets sort of like flashbacks and sort of becomes the original Godzilla and starts going on a rampage. And I wish they focused on that a little more. But overall, I do think Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is a very solid movie, and I definitely recommend that you check it out. Now, as far as this figure specifically goes, we have the next entry in Bandai's line of, 2.0 versions of existing Movie Monster Series figures. And the original release, a lot of people really didn't like the original release, I was fine with it. It was lacking in a lot of paint, but I was able to look past that because the sculpting looked really nice at the time. I thought it was a very nice stand-in for an affordable 6-inch Kiryu figure. And sure enough, Bandai comes along and they make a version 2.0 that is significantly better. I mean, you look at this guy and then you look at the original and it kind of speaks for itself. So I'm really happy Bandai decided to make a 2.0 version of Kiryu here. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say. So let's just get right into this. Like usual, to start, we'll take a look at the tag, and for the front here, we have a nice picture of Kiryu from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and I think this picture looks really nice. I think the daytime setting really fits Kiryu, so I think this is great. At the bottom here, we have Mechagodzilla version 2.0, both in English and in Japanese, though in Japanese, 2002 is added. We have Godzilla 2025, and a little bit of legal information here. On the back here, we have a nice silhouette of Kiryu shoulder weapons, Bandai Namco, 3. Right here, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, or Godzilla X Mechagodzilla, whatever you want to call it. Right here, we have Movie Monster Series, and the same thing in Japanese, Bandai, Godzilla, some more legal information. On the inside, we have a little bit of a bio here, talking about Kiryu. It's in Japanese, so I don't really know what that says, but I do know that, this does talk about, Kiryu's lore in the movie. And the rest here is just legal information. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the tag. Now, going back to the figure itself, to start, we'll take a look at the paint. And right off the bat, I just want to say this is a huge upgrade from the original release. The original release, it was only 2 colors. This figure has a lot more variety here, and I think that's really nice. So let's take a closer look. So as you can see, the entirety of this figure is casted in this metallic silver, which I think looks really nice. This is actually a darker silver than the original release, and I think the darker colors here, hide the unpainted parts a lot more. For the front here, we have some black painted on the thighs and on the neck here, which I think looks really nice. This is what we should have gotten before, rather than, that. But this looks nice, It's still not, entirely painted. There's, the upper part of the neck here that's not painted. There's some wiring in the arms that aren't painted. The back of the legs here. And even the tail here. It's still noticeable. But again, I think the darker, coloration here, I think, helps hide that a little more. But still, I do still really like the black, in the front of the figure here, It looks good, More black would have been nice on the tail, or even, the back of the figure. But, as is, I'm happy with this. The amount of black here, it looks nice, Probably the best we're gonna get as far as like a painted movie monster series Kiryu figure goes, so I'm happy with this. Kiryu's arm weapons here are going to be a very dark shade of blue, which again is much different from the original release. That was a much brighter shade of blue. And Kiryu's shoulder weapons here, again, just the same shade of blue, which looks nice. The ends here are going to be painted a much darker shade of gray, which looks really nice. Going to the head here, we can see that the eyes are painted yellow. And Kiryu's tear things, whatever you want to call these are going to be painted red. And I think they look good. And that's pretty much it for the painting here. I mean, like, on the knees here, we do have these like, red little arrow things. And they look nice, though this one, I think, looks a little smudged compared to this one, which looks a lot sharper. But still, overall, I think the painting on this figure, it's still not perfect, but it's a huge step up from the original. So overall, I'd say the painting on this figure, I'd say it gets 3/4 of a pass. Like, the new stuff that's here is really nice, but there could have been more. Again, I know, like, the economy is not what it used to be, so, the painting on figures is gonna, decline a little bit since, the original line of movie monster series figures, but still, a guy can dream, can't he? Painting on this figure, very solid. 3/4 of a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation, and it's pretty much the same as the original, so I won't go into too much detail here. The arms can move 360 degrees. The head can move 360 degrees as well. And the tail can move 360 degrees. And that's pretty much it. It's a movie monster series figure. It's all it really needs to be, You could probably say that, like, there could be articulation in the legs, but because the thighs here are painted, I feel like that might scratch up the paint a little bit, so I'm fine with this. So, overall, let me center him a little bit there. There we go. Overall, the articulation on this figure, it's fine. I'd say it gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the sculpt. And the sculpting on this figure, for the most part, I think is, like, pretty much perfect. I think, like, this looks pretty one-to-one to what we see in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The original figure, at the time I thought it looked really good, but comparing this guy to, the new version here, yeah, I'm noticing, like, a few, like, weird things with that figure. But this figure, for the most part, I think looks pretty much perfect. But notice the keywords there, for the most part, because there are a couple things that I would have done differently. For starters, I think the tail here is a little too long. Like, I know, like, I don't know, to me it looks a little off. I feel like it could have been just a hair shorter, but, it doesn't look terrible, And another thing, I don't know if it's just mine, but one of the shoulder weapons here is sort of like, like, it's not really aligned with this one here, so it just looks a little weird, I'm sure maybe, like, a hair blow dryer could fix that, but, yeah, my copy's a little messed up, but besides that, though, the sculpting here is still a huge improvement over the original, the head, I think, looks much better. The arm weapons here actually stick out more, and overall, the sculpting on this figure is still very good. So, the sculpting on this figure, despite the tail and the misaligned shoulder weapons, I'd say the sculpting here, I'd say gets 3/4 of a pass. I'm like, the weirdness of the shoulder weapons here and, like, the tail that's just a little too long for me is a little distracting. It still looks great, don't get me wrong, and it's still a huge upgrade from the original release, but it's still a little distracting for me, so unfortunately, I am still going to have to give this figure 3/4 of a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing, and the detailing on this figure I think looks very good, so let's take a closer look at that. So, starting off at the head here, we can see all of the, like, panels and all, like, the wiring and, like, the head here, I think is detailed very nicely, and even, like, the eyes here, there's, like, a little bit of, like, paneling in the eyes, and I think that looks really cool. And just a lot of really nice mechanical detailing here, like, all throughout, like, the neck and, like, the head. It looks great, The The inside of the mouth here has a lot of really nice detailing in there, which just looks great. The shoulder weapons here are detailed very nicely as well. Again, all like the panels and everything are detailed very nicely and very well defined. Going to the torso here, again, just a lot of really nice like wiring here, and like the panels for his chest here are detailed very nicely. And the arms too, again, like all the wiring in the arms here and just all the paneling, everything here looks great, and like going to the legs here, I think, like I know I mentioned this like with the paint, but like I think like the darker like coloration sort of, it hides all the unpainted parts, but it also makes like the detailing pop a little more. And especially when they're painted like this, like you can just see the detailing in the thighs here, they just looks really nice. Like all the wiring here looks great. And same with like the, like the ankles here, like the tops of the feet here looks great. Just a lot of really nice detailing here. And the arm weapons here, again, just a lot of really nice like mechanical detailing here. Looks great. The dorsal plates here, again, just look really nice. Just a lot of really nice detailing here. And this tail here, again, all of the panels and all of like the wiring here is detailed very nicely. And it's going to look very nice all the way to the end of the tail, which has some just more really nice looking detailing. And unlike with the original figure, the underside of the feet are detailed as well. And they look very nice. They didn't have to do this. I was fine with the original, having bare feet, but this looks really good. And I like this. And that's pretty much it for the detailing on this figure. And overall, the detailing here is great. So the detailing, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons. To start, here we have the original Movie Monster Series Kiryu, 2002. And do I need to say anything? Let me just say, when this guy came out, I was happy with him, right? The painting could have been a lot better, but, I think, I think, like, I was fine with the sculpt, I was fine with the detailing, I was fine with this figure. As far as, like, affordable, like, Kiryu figures go, I was content. But now we have this guy. And now this guy is just, he's just kind of there, right? Like, I know earlier in this video, I was talking about how, like, even though, like, there's more paint on this figure, I still think it should have been painted a little more. And I still stand by that, but this figure is still a huge upgrade to this figure. So, I don't know what I'm going to do with this guy. He might stick around, I don't know, but either way, this guy is definitely taking his place on the shelf. Here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla, 2002. Here we have the SH Monster Arts Godzilla 2002. And of course, here we have some hand sanitizer. And here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? While this figure isn't perfect, nothing's perfect. Anyway, this figure is really nice. I do really like this figure, The painting, I think, looks really nice. It's a huge step up from the original release, The articulation, I mean, not a lot to say there. The sculpting is great. The detailing is great. Overall, this is a really nice figure, and I definitely recommend that you pick this figure up. I know in the review, I might have been a little harsher on this figure, and there are some things that I would have done differently here, but overall, I'm still very pleased with this figure, It's really nice to have a 6-inch Bandai vinyl of Kiryu, not only with his weapons, but also looking presentable. I'm really happy here, so yes, I definitely recommend that you pick this figure up. Now, as far as prices go, I got this guy from Hobby Link Japan for about $25-26, and I think that's a pretty fair price. Like, the original, that might have been pushing it, but for this figure, I think that's pretty fair, This is a really nice figure, and I think it's worth that, like, $25-26 price range. Now, when it comes to shipping, this is when things get a little tricky. Because, like, I used to go with FedEx. FedEx was my go-to when it came to shipping from Hobby Link Japan. They got here with FedEx, they got to my house very quickly. They like, you didn't need a signature because this is, like, an overseas, like, like, import here. And overall, FedEx was just my go-to, and I was happy with FedEx. But, unfortunately, and a lot of people have talked about this issue probably better than I will, so if you want to know more about this, then I'd say just do a little bit more research. But, unfortunately, tariffs are now a thing, which, without getting political, tariffs are going to affect, a lot of companies, they're going to affect a lot of businesses, and they are going to affect, pretty much all consumers, Hobbylink Japan, that is a business that, imports, like, Japanese, like, goods from Japan to the U.S., and now that there are tariffs on all of these, different, countries, things are going to be a little more expensive. Not only that, but because of the tariffs, Hobbylink Japan had to stop using certain services, one of which being FedEx, which is a little annoying. So as far as shipping, I use DHL. They're still using DHL, so that's what I used. But, they still have, like, other, like, shipping options, but just know, because of the tariffs that are going on right now, shipping from, like, proxy shops like Hobbylink Japan or Bai or, Ami, like, it's going to be more expensive, Hopefully this doesn't last too long. Hopefully this will only be for, like, hopefully this will be temporary, right? But shipping is going to be more expensive, at least for a while. At least for the time being, I should say. So, yeah. So just expect that. If you're gonna, import this guy like I did, just expect the shipping price to be a little higher than normal. But I digress. Anyway, this is still a really nice figure, and I still definitely recommend that you pick this figure up. That being said, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.